Hi, and welcome to the Midday Market Update for November 17th, 2020. My name's Kevin Hill, and as always, here with Michael Vincent.
Hey, welcome everybody this beautiful Tuesday afternoon from Chattanooga, the heart of Freight Alley.
The heart of Freight Alley?
Yeah, it is. And this is an interactive show, so get your comments and questions in on, what are we on? We're on FreightWaves LinkedIn. Right,
we're
on
yes,
LinkedIn and on Facebook. Get those comments in and questions, and we'll be happy to answer them and get them on the air and talk to our guests.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me to refresh LinkedIn here, so we can do the comments. We have an exciting show for you today, taking you all around the freight world, starting with the news and Andrew Cox over here, the headlines on FreightWaves.com, and then we're going to talk about the freight markets, the economy. And then we have a couple of special guests coming on at the bottom of the hour. And those would be John Gallagher, our Chief Washington Correspondent here at FreightWaves, talking about agricultural haulers and biodiesel.
Yeah, the internal combustion engine ban potential, that type of stuff, the effects, right?
Yeah, the long-term.
And then Ken Sherman, Vice President and General Manager at IntelliTrans, talking about upstream logistics and what's going on there in that space.
Yeah, and then we have the weather sprinkled in there. We have some snow and hurricanes and all kinds of crazy things. Of course, it's 2020, but
does not fail to keep our interest, does it?
It does not. It does not. So let's start off with the news from FreightWaves.com. And if you're not a subscriber to our new newsletter, which should be hitting inboxes right now, go to FreightWaves.com and subscribe to all the latest stories delivered to your inbox every single day. And with those headlines, Andrew Cox, what do we have first on the docket today?
Yeah, Kevin, first midday market update back in a few weeks, and I get a treat of reporting the news of Tesla going to be included in the S&P 500 beginning next month. So the electric car maker and truck maker Tesla will be joining the S&P on December 21st of this year. The requirement to join the S&P 500, which is a list of the 500 biggest companies in our country, is 4 consecutive quarterly profit quarters. And Tesla last month just notched their 5th straight quarterly profit at 76 cents per share, beating expectations of 57 cents per share. Year-over-year revenues are up high. They're up 39% to $8.77 billion in Q3. And the market reaction was immediate on this news. Tesla stock was up 10% after market yesterday when the news came out.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it, Andrew? So they're reading that their market cap is, what is it, $387 billion or something like that, making them one of the most highly valued on the S&P?
Yes, it'll be in the top 10. I believe the top 10 most valuable companies in the S&P. It'll be very high. They're even thinking about doing some sort of tranche method to getting those shares, getting Tesla into the S&P. I'm not sure totally on how that's going to work out, but Tesla by far will be one of the highest valued companies upon its entry into the S&P 500.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Andrew. Why do they do that? Why are they looking at splitting that into 2 different tranches?
Yeah, like I said, I can't really speak to it. I don't know much about the reasoning and the methodology behind it. I just know that they will be very valuable when they go into the S&P 500. The minimum to get into the S&P 500 is a market cap of just over $8 billion. And like you said, Tesla is nearing $400 billion on the news yesterday, so very valuable.
So it takes 4 consecutive quarters of positive, profitability to get included on the S&P. Tesla has done it 5 straight quarters. What are the odds that they somehow slip up and not return a positive quarter after they get included?
I think the odds are slim. Most projections are seeing a blowout fourth quarter for Tesla. Tesla's been able to grow volumes consistently quarter over quarter, and unlike most of the other car makers across the world, they've really seen just strong demand throughout. They didn't really see much of a drop there in March, April, and May. They're looking to deliver 500,000 cars this year. That'll be a 100% gain year over year from last year. They're doing it more profitably. The new Shanghai factory has come online quicker than any of their previous factories, and they're already producing profitable cars there. So if they slip up in Q4, it would be a big surprise, and you would see likely a big sell-off in the stock.
Well, I know our very own Dooner is contributing that profitability with his Cybertruck purchase that he talks about all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. He actually commented and said they're at a $423 billion market cap, so he might have bought a couple more trucks.
I know. I think so. It's probably all about that. So the news has been overflowing on vaccines and delivery and distribution. What do we have on that front, Andrew?
Yeah, Kevin, President-elect Biden and his aides are warning that the White House's unwillingness to facilitate a transition to a new administration could create logistics problems that delay the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine and cost thousands of lives. The inability to meet with current officials leaves gaps in the logistics plans and creates a longer learning curve once the power is exchanged. And remember, this is one of the most complex logistics operations in human history, given the scale. Just the U.S. alone, we've got to distribute, vaccines to 330 million people, likely having multiple doses for some of those people, and the urgency to complete the vaccinations, given the skyrocketing hospitalizations and the death counts, is imperative. Biden told reporters Monday that if we have to wait until January 20th to start planning, it puts us over a month and a half behind. Biden's choice of chief of staff, Ron Klain, said it best. He said, "It's great to have a vaccine, but vaccines don't save lives. Vaccinations save lives. That means you're going to have to get the vaccine into people's arms all over the country, and that is a giant modern logistical problem."
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't concur more with Ron Klain. I mean, he said that during one of our last conferences that he was speaking to, that the vaccines logistics solves pandemics, right?
Yeah, I think that was FreightWaves Live at Home this spring.
Yeah.
The spring, he was one of our keynote speakers on there and talking about health. Rhonda Zimmerman, the great yoga instructor, says good morning. And so does James Fry from Universal Truckload. Good afternoon from Michigan. And also, it's pouring in now. It's finally refreshing here. Amanda Miller, again, good afternoon. So, yeah, it's going to be quite a complex task moving the vaccines around, and we have both Pfizer and Moderna with two very different type of delivery, terms, right?
The requirements for them are
90 degrees.
Yeah, the required logistics are really severely different. And Moderna actually would be much easier logistically to disperse and do the vaccinations. You can keep it in a refrigerator for like 30 days, and it's -4 degrees storage. So the distribution and then the actual giving a vaccination process would be a lot easier, as you wouldn't have to so much schedule the people or potentially bring the people to the vaccination under the Pfizer scenario.
Yeah, I think the double doses are probably the major hurdle out of all of that. Maybe is that campaign to get 2 doses administered.
Yeah, it compounds above the necessity for the what do you call it, cryogenic freezers.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Which aren't in an abundant supply.
Exactly. We have some news on the tariffs front with C.H. Robinson, right, Andrew?
Yeah, sure, Kevin. C.H. Robinson believes that many American businesses could lose out on the rightfully owed money if they don't act soon. C.H. has run data analysis on the Section 301 China trade tariffs, which are eligible for exclusions, and found that American companies have not acted in securing approvals for exclusions written into the tariffs by the Trump administration. Mike Short, C.H. Robinson, president of Global Forwarding, told FreightWaves that current tariff exclusions expire on December 31st. And if companies have not applied for refunds for tariffs paid on exempted products by then, they'll lose out on the opportunities to recoup that money. CH has been proactively reaching out to its customers to help them recoup funds. The future of tariffs is uncertain, but the exclusions are limited. CH has also set up a Trade and Tariffs Insight Hub that provides the latest updates on the Section 301 tariffs, so head to their website for all the real-time updates on the Section 301 tariff exclusions.
Yeah, they're looking at a potential for $980 million product or a value of potential exception or exceptions to this rule. So over 2/3 of those specified could be excluded from these tariffs. So it's not just medical supplies, right?
That's right. There's a wide swath of products that are available for exclusion here. There's hundreds of millions of dollars still at play. But again, up to December 31st for those exclusions to expire, so they've got to act quickly.
Yeah, it's a rebate system that probably a lot of importers didn't realize that they even qualified for. So I would advise anyone to seek out advice, C.H. Robinson or anyone else that can provide it to get those rebates. Everyone loves rebates, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, you have just over a month to do this, and I see C.H. Robinson. They're going out there and they're talking to their customers to you know, I mean, they know what they ship, right? So so they're advising them. So yeah, it's a good idea to look into that stuff. I thought it was a lot of the exceptions were just like the PPEs and stuff like that, but apparently it's 2/3 of it is not medical related.
Yeah, it exactly is.
And it's very commodity specific.
It is. It definitely is. So I started off, you know, talking about the FreightWaves.com newsletter and that daily host of news coming up. We've also started, Andrew Cox has started his own newsletter here at FreightWaves. Please tell us a little bit more.
The title of the newsletter is Point of Sale. It is focused on the retail supply chain, so the trends and changes in the retail supply chain. The truth is that that retail has gone through this transformation over the last 20 years with e-commerce and a lot of, you know, cool hip things that cause media to cover them in a new kind of fresh way. But there's a really big gap to the retail supply chain. There's nobody covering that space with this fresh kind of new look at things. So that's where we're trying to fill a gap there. So we take a look at, I mean, all kinds of survey data, as well as Sonar data, as well as stories in the news. Like, for instance, the most recent one that came out yesterday, the top story was the Walmart and Amazon ocean capacity arms race that's going on right now. Both companies are importing a lot of goods into the U.S., most of which is coming from China, but they're taking different routes to get it here. Walmart is using the East Coast, Amazon using the West Coast. So I broke down the reasons for why that's happening and what we can expect moving into 2021 on that. And then one more article for you on that newsletter was the Target and Ulta deal. They announced that they're going to be building out 100 Ulta shops inside Target over the next year. I think that's a great move for Ulta. They get to leverage the Target distribution and supply chain to sell their goods. So you get insights like that. It comes out every Monday and Wednesday. We may scale it up from there, but right now, I'm sorry, just Monday and Thursday, rather. Monday and Thursday on Point of Sale. You can sign up at freightwaves.com/communities.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, definitely go to freightwaves.com/communities to subscribe to all of our industry-specific newsletters out there. It's great information delivered to your inbox.
Oh yeah, no, it really is. It's a great lot of great information that Andrew's bringing to the industry. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. And we have some weather shout-outs here. That Nick got running here. You know, Jeff Sumiski from Dalton, Georgia, sunny and 59 degrees. He's the District HR SME at Kroger. And we also have Ryan Monahanan, Associate Consultant, Carlisle and Companies. He has a question on the carrier side, right? Are carriers taking any precautionary actions to prepare for the distribution of the vaccine?
Yeah, so most of those that we talk to, right, those that are involved with Operation Warp Speed, right, they definitely are in conjunction with the government, you know, with the military, as far as putting that together. But in general, those who aren't involved with that, basically not, because they're not involved with that. If you're going to be involved with it, you're already selected and you already know. And you've been in planning for months and months and months. So,
yeah, I don't think there's going to be much spot market activity with the vaccine, right?
Yeah, there's too much at stake here. I mean, you think about the logistics, but then all of the data that has to be collected and verified, you know, for the use of that vaccine. The temperature has to be verified throughout the entire process and so on. So, yeah, there's a lot of details here and a lot of controls that have to be done. You're going to be injecting a vaccine into humans. You need to know exactly what happened with that shipment. Yeah,
it's definitely complex. It reminds me of the weather, because weather is always complex as well. And we have Nick Austin here to tell us what we're facing today. How's it going, Nick?
Hey, pretty good, Kevin. We got a snowstorm that's going to be developing out in the Sierra Nevada, and a lot of high winds across that region too, from eastern California into Nevada. It's really going to start cranking up later today. But this is kind of the time of the year where we start to see these storms and more frequency across the Sierra Nevada. And it's going to, you know, they usually last on and off all through the winter and even into the early part of the spring. So in Sonar Critical Events, we've got the radar pulled up on the map here. And right now it's just rainfall that's coming into the West Coast. But later today, as that rain moves towards the Sierra Nevada, it's going to turn into some really heavy snow. Nothing really atypical for a snowstorm this time of the year in this region. But again, not great for truckers out there, not just because of heavy snowfall. We're talking about 1 to 2 feet in a lot of the high elevations. It'll impact parts of Interstate 80, like going over Donner Pass, a lot of the other mountain passes as well. But there's going to be a lot of high winds. That's going to be another one of the issues. Frankly, I think a bigger issue than a lot of the snowfall, especially along the interstate. So winter storm warnings, where I'm hovering over right here. We have a lot of high wind warnings as well, which will also affect the Reno and Carson City areas, the greater Lake Tahoe area. Wind gusts of anywhere from 50 to 80 miles per hour across this region. So deadheading, hauling light loads, certainly going to be a very risky move. Don't want to do that there for the next couple of days. And I think the winds will be definitely a bigger issue, as I mentioned, than the snowfall. But at least for a lot of the secondary roads and those mountain passes, the snow is going to be piling up pretty quickly, especially tonight and in the first part of tomorrow. But there'll even be light and moderate snow through the rest of the day tomorrow. And then heading into the weekend, once this storm kind of falls apart and dissipates, there may be some heavy snow coming to some of the Rockies, the Colorado Rockies, and maybe near the Denver area and those high elevations coming up later in the week. So carriers and shippers need to be on the lookout for that as well.
Thank you very much for that update, Nick. And we'll have Nick back at the top of the hour, or the later half of the show, to talk about what those weather conditions, what are the worst ones for truck drivers. So that'll be a very interesting segment coming up here and shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be remiss if I don't,
Remiss?
Yes.
So you really be remiss?
I will, okay. Absolutely. If I do not mention that, FreightWaves.com/What the Truck and sign up for the What the Truck newsletter.
You would be remiss.
As well.
Yes.
I would. I'm biased towards that one. There's a new one dropping 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, always entertaining.
Oh, yeah, they're awesome.
They're always entertaining. You know what else is entertaining?
And informative.
They are. You know what else is entertaining and informative?
I have no idea.
Or who, I should say?
Zach Strickland.
Yes, our Director of Freight Market Intelligence here at FreightWaves. We're going to talk about the freight markets and capacity, load volumes, what's going on this week before the holiday.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for that entertaining comment. So tender rejections back on the rise this week after taking last week off. It was a little bit surprising to see tender rejections come back down. They weren't like significantly falling or anything like that, but they did come back down under 26% for a hot moment. Again, still really high. I mean, 1 out of every 4 loads getting rejected still. But now we're starting to see them trend back higher. And some of the more interesting aspects of it are just where we're seeing some of these rejection rates start to increase. The Atlanta market, for instance, we're seeing tender rejection rates jump back over 23%. This has been one of the cooler of the larger markets in the United States over the last couple of months, really. The Southeast has not seen the volatility that the West Coast and Northeast has. So the Atlanta rejection starting to come up now. Dallas also starting to see a little bit more activity after having a very long trend line of lowering rejections. Now, we're not seeing things really disrupt and break apart just yet. We're kind of waiting on that big moment of inflection where we see that holiday supply side contraction occur, where all these carriers get boundaried into their certain regions or their areas, so they can get home for the holiday. And we haven't seen that breakout yet, but we are starting to see some of those early warning signs of like, all right, shippers, get ready, because they are starting to get a little bit less available.
Yeah, when you look at the maps, the 3D maps, and you look at the interplay between those markets, Zach, you see like in Southern California and the Atlanta market with dry van and even reefer, the volume is really high. And you see that interplay with the surrounding markets where the tender rejections are just deep dark blue, meaning they're really, really high.
Yeah, and what's interesting this year is the divergence between reefer and dry van. Reefer has really, seen more significant divergence from rejection rates, at least from dry van, than we have in years past. Right around the holidays, and we don't know if that's due to the COVID or what it is, but here over the last month or two, we've really seen reefer rejection rates take off. We're looking at 46.62% on the national reefer rejection rate, whereas for the dry van side, we're seeing 25.8% rejection rate. And a lot of that's occurring in the Northwest, but all over the country, really. Reefer rejection rates extremely high, as a lot of the reefer capacity is obviously a little bit more scattered, not necessarily as deep of a coverage zone as the dry van, which occupies the majority of the marketplace.
Zach, I know Thanksgiving is next week. You talked about the Northwest a little bit. They tell me, though, Christmas is coming earlier this year than any other year. Are we seeing any movements on that?
Yeah, so we, traditionally the Christmas trees start to move next week into, the late part of November, but I think a lot of people have been getting a little bit of a jump on things. The Northwest, specifically on the reefer side, has seen some really significant increases in the reefer side. Their van rejection rates still where they always are, down in the low teens, or I shouldn't say always are, but they're very lagging with the rest of the United States, as carriers tend to want to get out of the Northwest as fast as possible because there's just not enough outbound volume to keep them moving, unless you want to get stuck up there and move regionally. Now, Nick was talking about a weather system coming in over the weekend, but a lot of those carriers really, they're willing to drive through a lot of those mountain passes. Donner Pass, of course, notorious for stranding drivers out there as they close that segment. But reefer rejection rates right now, as it stands, are starting to trend a little bit further down out of the Northwest, which is interesting, considering that area has been one of the hottest, pun not intended, for reefer rejections here over the last 2 to 3 months, as it is their subsequent produce season, if you will, for the potatoes and the apples, and now the Christmas trees are probably going to add to that, along with the fact that the holidays are going to shut a lot of people down.
So Zach, I'm interested. This time of year, not only the volumes, but you also have the the activities of the drivers. They want to get home for the holidays, et cetera, right? And so seasonally, we would see outbound tender rejections or capacity kind of loosen a little bit from where it is at the beginning of November, going through the month, and then spike again right before Thanksgiving, and then going into Christmas as well. A lot of that due to not only the volumes, but drivers going home, right? Parking their rigs and want to be home for the holidays. With the inflated rates, are you looking for the same type of effect this year, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're obviously going to see rejection rates increase. The big question is just how much they're going to increase. We're already starting to see them rise pretty much everywhere in the country right now, but just slightly so. And it's really hard to determine how much of that has to do with just 2020 or the holiday itself, as what we were talking about with the drivers coming off the road and whatnot. A lot of people, we've talked to Zach Rogers in the past, who thinks that we're going to see, certainly more capacity tightening, but we've almost hit this artificial ceiling with the rejection rate right around this mid-20s point, where we just carriers don't really want to reject much more than this level of freight unless they absolutely cannot cover things. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in the rejection rate right now isn't necessarily their inability to cover freight, but more their their unwillingness to cover freight at the rates that are currently offered on the contracted side.
That's always the biggest caveat right there.
Yeah.
Right, Zach. I thank you so much for that freight market update for us, and we will catch you on Thursday for more information about capacity. We'll see how those OTRI and tender rejection levels go.
Yeah, we certainly will.
We certainly will. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how everybody reacts, because as Zach was mentioning, seasonally you would expect a little bit of a dip and then go up. Mm-hmm. How many people how are people going to react? What is it? Is it 2020? Does e-commerce throw a huge thing in? And it already is with the volumes, right? But I'm talking about the reaction to the market and the holidays as far as rigs shutting down versus making $3 a mile.
Yeah, definitely. Nico Brown's in the house, so hello, Nico.
Hello,
Rob
Nico.
Gonzalez, how is the chat about automation and AI going with carriers nationwide? Automation and driving as the bold point. We talked about that quite a bit at our latest event, FreightWaves Live at Home. So go to tv.freightwaves.com or live.freightwaves.com to check out those discussions. It's a wealth of information. And talking about a wealth of information, Michael Vincent, let's talk about the economy and our lead economist here, Anthony Smith.
Absolutely.
And
Let's
get
do
the latest economic numbers.
Yes.
Hey guys, yeah, we have a few economic releases that have come through just this morning. We have industrial production and retail sales, both showing positive monthly movement. Starting with industrial production, we saw there was a 1.1% monthly increase. And so this was a bit of a jump and a bit of outpacing expectations. I know, especially on my end. Looking at industrial production and the ISM PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, both of those were manufacturing indices that outpaced my expectations. Not afraid to admit when I am, a bit off or undersold a particular segment. So looking at the industrial segment, looking at that, there was some overall expansion. Not to say that this is at year-ago levels because it's not there just yet, but there is some momentum building. It's going to take more than just 1 or 2 months of movement, but when we're looking at the PMI, we saw continuous movement there, and we saw over a 7 percentage point gain for the new orders component. So that's something to say for future production. So looking at both segments, or both components for manufacturing, it shows that there is some momentum building behind industrial production, behind manufacturing, but we're not quite at year-ago levels just yet. When we look at industrial production overall, it's still around 5.5, 5.3% below the year-ago level. So there's still some ground to make up here, but we're seeing some momentum build overall.
So in your expert opinion, Anthony, do these numbers, these latest economic numbers, do those give you Christmas cheer going forward into the holidays?
I don't know if it'll give me any kind of Christmas cheer. I know definitely it is a little bit of relief going into the end of the year because we had some harder comps coming up towards the end of the year for industrial production especially. I'm a little bit more excited about retail sales. This one can go either way. We saw the monthly increase for retail sales go up 0.3%. And this is an area that I think we've been kind of calling it correctly. It's slowing in its momentum. Although the overall pace is, or the overall rate is high, we're looking at overall retail sales. There has been a gain of just over 8.5%, I believe it is, on a year-over-year basis. But we're looking at month-to-month growth. When we're looking at the pace of growth, the rate of growth, it's certainly slowing. And there's going to be, I think, some uphill momentum, uphill battles looking at retail sales as we're looking at consumer conditions. We have unemployment still relatively high, although it's coming down slowly but surely. But the conditions for consumers have not quite changed too much. We're looking at what's going on with any kind of a stimulus plan or package being put in place by Congress. There's still some ways to go with kind of getting consumers in a good place so far.
Do you think, Anthony, on those economic numbers, too, and Andrew Cox wrote about this in his newsletter, Point of Sale, about the multiple Black Fridays that are popping up, Walmart, I think Target's following suit. Do you think that's going to throw a wrench into the traditional retail data that we get from the government?
I don't think it'll throw too much of a wrench at all. This is one of the things that Zach Strickland and myself spoke about on one of our Freightonomics podcasts. We're going over what was happening within the month of November because it's not going to be likely that we're going to see any kind of Black Friday lines and large crowds congregating in many metropolitan areas. We're likely going to see Black Friday deals begin earlier on in this month and last throughout the month and going into Cyber Monday, of course. So we're going to see those volumes kind of trickle in, instead of being these large spikes. It's going to be something they're going to capture throughout the month. And on that note, I'm hearing from a lot of respondents talking about how they are having inventory pulled forward, not just in expectation for these Black Friday deals that's happening right now throughout the month for many outlets, but also for some outlets that are maybe for food and grocery facing outlets that are expecting a second wave of COVID-19 to hit us. And with those expectations, some of those individuals are going to really kind of pull forward product in order to get ahead of some of the rushes that might happen if we're starting to see more lockdowns and shutdowns across the country.
That's an interesting point. The effects of potential lockdowns or actual lockdowns that are coming in. You've got travel restrictions out in the west, and you've got other cities and areas going into not complete lockdowns, but certainly going back into that scenario and that pull forward along with the heavy Christmas holiday season could cause some major capacity crunches and some logistical nightmares, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's California, Oregon, Washington all being together for a travel advisory out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But yeah, that makes sense that there's more of a rise and a plateau of activity because, Black Friday was pulled forward and it is throughout the entire month instead of those major spikes. But thank you so much, Anthony, for all those insights.
Great.
Yeah, so we have John Gallagher.
We do, our chief Washington correspondent here at FreightWaves. We're going to talk about some biofuels and the ag community and kind of what's going on with that from the Washington, D.C. perspective. How are you doing today, John?
I'm good, you guys. Hi, Michael and Kevin. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Great. Let's talk about the article that you have out that you published this morning on FreightWaves.com. And can you give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, well, the story basically it basically centers around the unintended consequences or unintended and unanticipated consequences of clean climate policy, basically. So, while it's obviously these policies, green policies, are obviously good for the environment, there are ramifications that need to be considered, including potential effects to truck hauling markets. So basically, the Democratic committee in Congress this past summer, the committee called the Climate Change, it's a special committee called the Climate Action Committee, and they put out this plan where basically 100% sales of zero-emission cars to be achieved by 2035, and 100% sales of zero-emission heavy-duty trucks by 2040. So this group that's very active in Washington, it's called the Ag Retailers Association. They responded to that. So they see that basically as equating it to a ban on internal combustion engines. So they put out this report just recently showing the ramifications of that would happen to the ag industry, which supplies the two types of renewable fuels that rely basically biodiesel and ethanol. And so those are blended into diesel fuel and gasoline. So because the electric vehicles you don't use these two types of fuels, they say that this 19 billion gallon market for U.S. biofuels, which goes into supporting the ag industry, would be devastated by this plan, basically. And so I mean, U.S. is the largest producer. From what I understand, the U.S. is like the largest producer of biodiesel. They have like in the world, they have like a 22% share of the world market. So to put it in a little bit more perspective, the USDA. So I saw the latest stats from USDA for the 2019-2020 harvest season. They estimate ethanol production would consume 36% of U.S. corn produced, and biodiesel production would consume 31% of soy oil, which is produced from soybeans. So, corn and soybeans make up a huge part of the U.S. ag market. So basically, this report was showing what happens when these climate change policies come about. Now, obviously, the big question is, will it go into place? And that's another question and debate we can have.
Yeah, so I mean, they put in these guidelines. This isn't it's a guideline or a wish to get rid of, to have zero emission vehicles by 2035, I guess. That's right. It's not a mandate or anything like that. This is kind of like, this is what we're trying to do. And now the discussion comes about, who does this affect? How do we get to that, right? That's right.
Yeah, that's right, okay. Michael. Right. And so, we have a Biden administration coming in, and Joe Biden's been no secrets about his plans for his green plans and electric. He's always talked about green energy and his aggressive climate plan. So that is going to get a push from this administration, obviously. But we'll see what happens.
Yes, it's always interesting. You have these studies and forecasts and goals for 2035. Things that are 15, 20, 30 years out, and just how much teeth they really have. Is it more of a thought exercise, or do you think that there's going to be actual policies enacted to push this proposal or this destination along?
Yeah, I think it's more than a thought exercise, Kevin. I think it's they do that for starting points, for debate starting points. So they put this out this summer. The House Democrats committee put this out this summer to kind of they're starting to draw these battle lines and starting points of where you start to negotiate either the years that you want to use. Or the percentages of what you want to happen. And California already has. I think our colleague Linda did a story a few weeks ago about California. Gavin Newsom, they had an executive order to develop 100% zero emissions by 2045. I think in California. Yes. With the mandate, I think 2035 for drayage trucks. I think.
Yes, that's right.
That's already an executive order there, and California pushes a lot of this climate policy out to other states.
Yeah, well, it seems to me. it doesn't sound. We want zero emissions, right? That's a good thing,
I
right?
think we all do. Yes.
So, it makes sense that you have to put out these timelines and goals and put a little bit of teeth to them in order to move progress. Because if you say, hey, let's talk about it, we'll be talking about it for,
Well, I think we can all argue about how to get to zero emissions.
Yeah.
But I think it's a goal.
Well, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because when you look at this, and in the article, John, you talked to this a little bit. Is the effects on corn and soybean on the growers in those markets, and you touched on that a little bit. But you're talking about 4.2 billion. 4.2 billion bushels of corn consumption a year would drop to 400 million.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it was. It's a huge drop.
Yeah, I read that and I went, wait a minute, is it a drop of 400 million? No, it's a drop of 3.8 billion bushels would drop.
Yeah, it would drop exactly drop to that number. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's devastating. And that's, you put it out there at 2035 for wanting these type of things and then figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Because that absolutely wipes out the corn industry, right? It's over.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a side effect. I didn't get into too much, but you could just speculate that those are big markets also for the trucks that haul that stuff. So, to market or between from farm to intermediaries. So, when you assume the demand is going to fall that much, that's going to obviously have an effect on that market that hauls that. With less product to haul, so that could obviously have an effect on demand and prices and maybe contract prices as well there.
Yeah, if let's switch gears just a little bit with the time we have left, John, about the future into now and the breaking news that you had, I believe it was yesterday, on the Washington law that kind of matches California as it deals with lunch breaks, I believe.
Oh yeah, the meal and rest breaks. And it was something. Yeah, so basically, the state of Washington last year asked for I'm sorry, it wasn't the state of Washington. The Washington Truckload Association actually asked the FMCSA to come to a determination similar to what they did in California, that the federal hours of service laws oversee or are over the state law, state meal and rest break laws. The state laws are more stringent, and so the trucking associations want to be able to default to the federal rules. So FMCSA yesterday determined that Washington they do have exemption over Washington. So basically, they have the federal rules are more flexible. So. And that was something that Chris Spear yesterday talked about he gave a talk at an association meeting yesterday at ATA, where this is going to be, they see this as a fight or a rule that they have leverage over, because in California, the Teamsters took this to the appeals court in California, and they're litigating that right now, or having oral arguments yesterday on it. And the ATA sees that they have they're in control on that, because they think that the Teamsters might be kind of having to defend this now. And they're pretty confident. It sounded like the ATA was pretty confident that they're going to win that battle in California, and they assume if they win the California battle, they'll get Washington State as well.
Yeah, I read that as well, that they would assume that, and there is a pretty big, I think, distinction between the two things, between California rules and the Washington rules, if I'm not mistaken, in that in the California rules they have to make available these additional, but then in Washington they have to prove it, right? The carriers have to prove that the employees took these additional meal breaks, right?
Yeah, that's right, Michael. And I think what it is, that the two states, it has to do with the 30-minute break as well. So I think in the two states, they require a 30-minute break for every 5-hour work period and a 10-minute break for every 4-hour work period. And so the federal rules are much more flexible there.
Yeah, it can get confusing with all the hours.
Real quick.
Real quick, yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time today, John. How does our audience reach out to learn more, become a source, pitch story ideas to you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. My email is jgallagher@freightwaves.com, and my Twitter handle is John A. Gallagher1.
Thank you very much. And you can find all of John's stories on FreightWaves.com. And he's written quite a few. We discussed a couple of those, the biofuels and the Washington breaks, and then also some labor. Chris Spear from ATA, he covered a ATA conference yesterday on some of the labor battles between owner-operators and the government. So, all good reads.
Yeah, very good reads. Very good reads. Yesterday we were talking with several people, but on what the truck, but talking about the vaccine and the differences between the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna. It's Moderna, right? And looking at those differences, both of them with really high, how do you say it, efficacy rates, right? They're both very, very effective. And those differences within those supply chains that have to, with the negative 94 degrees versus the minus 4 degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And what Lorianne Larocco, who, when we were talking to her about about Operations Warp Speed,
yeah.
And we were speaking with her when we first found out about the Pfizer was nearing being approved, right?
Yes.
And talking to these things and the possibility of having to bring people to the vaccine. And as you pointed out earlier, not once, but twice, because of its special handlings, is really difficult, right?
It's difficult. You have the special handling, you have the pure logistics, and then you have the adoption rate of what percentage of people who are going to get the first dose are going to come back and do the second dose. And I think a lot of people are very concerned about that. And a lot of people high up in Warp Speed are very concerned about that rate of the second dose.
Yeah, absolutely. And with those type of logistics bringing it on, it makes it more difficult to hit the the prioritized, right? I believe the prioritization would be what is frontline medical and essential. I would assume a lot of logistics positions would be put in that essential.
That would include a lot of logistics,
drivers, et cetera, which would be a very difficult task without some fairly decent disruptions to the actual supply chain to get drivers to that particular vaccine that is at minus 94 cryogenically, has to be cryogenically frozen, I guess is what they call that once it hits a certain degree. I've never been cryogenically frozen. How about yourself?
I have not.
You haven't?
I have not.
Okay.
Not yet. Not Ted Williams yet. Not Ted Williams yet. No. I forget who else has been frozen, but
it doesn't seem very, very nice. But so the Moderna is, a lot of people I'm sure are rooting for Moderna, right?
Yes, yeah,
because with the 30 days, the travel or the logistics, shipping the stuff, moving it about is a little bit much easier at -4.
Yeah, it's like a regular freezer. It's like an ice cream freezer.
Well, and you can store it 30 days in a refrigerator.
There.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the scheduling of it, the ability to go to your own doctor and get it is those possibilities are there instead of scheduling like regional trips where people are put on buses possibly, right? You imagine these different things where they come up and say, okay, everybody born on these specific dates with this last name board these buses and we're going to Knoxville or what, Yeah, it's kind of
confusing, definitely.
It's kind of strange.
It really is. Taylor Barker says, hello, guys. Rhonda had something here, interesting follow returns to now that people are shopping online and purchasing more they intended on keeping. So a little bit about reverse logistics there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking with Sherry Heinisch yesterday on What the Truck about that. She's CEO and founder, I believe, of Supply Chain Revolution. But she was talking about that and the lack of the circular economy that we have to deal with all these returns. So some of those just end up as waste. So are we producing a lot more waste because of this situation? And we've got to get that figured out. So reverse logistics, not only is it complicated, it's extremely necessary on many, many fronts.
It does. I wonder what raw material ordering
I don't
says
know.
about the waste and reverse logistics.
That's a great question. I know that's the guy we could talk to about that. His
Who
name
might
is
that be?
his name is Ken Sherman, and we have him right now. He is Vice President and General Manager at IntelliTrans. Ken, how are you today?
Good, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing great, my friend. Are you down in Atlanta?
Yes, I am. Fortunately, no storms forecasted here anytime soon.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's good.
You'd be buying up all the milk and eggs and bread if it was coming there.
Yeah, you know how we roll.
I know exactly how you roll. So, Ken, you've been on the show a couple times. Can you tell our audience, give a little bit about yourself and IntelliTrans and what you guys do there?
Sure. So what IntelliTrans does is we provide transportation management systems and services to a variety of folks in the industrial products segment, primarily bulk and break bulk commodity producers. And so what we've got is through the data in our systems, a pretty good view on what's going on with shipment volumes within those segments.
That's it's fascinating. You are our eyes and ears into the upstream of the supply chain and raw materials, and we are sitting here just wondering how that's performing right now.
Yeah, actually, things are going much better than I would have thought. Per one of the prior speakers' discussion. What we're seeing now is if I look at customers I had at the beginning of 2019 and that I still have today, so I'm looking at same-store sales, shipment volumes are basically back to 100% of what they were last year, rebounding from a low of about 81% of year over year, back in the April timeframe. What we're seeing is that even within our segments, though, is that there's kind of a K-shaped recovery going on, where some folks are doing really well. Those that tend to end up supplying goods that end up in the home kind of market, and others not as well, who are serving kind of more the industrial or office and restaurant kind of gig. So not surprising, and it's interesting that our customers often have trouble forecasting what they're seeing downstream from them, because they may not have complete visibility in terms of how, say, their plastic pellets ended up eventually being converted into a mask or chemicals that could be used in hand sanitizer, et cetera.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you think about raw materials, and probably most people who are not in that space of transporting that upstream, right? When I think of raw materials and you think of, okay, it came out of the ground, which is what you guys are moving and tracking, you think industrial right away, right? But that also translates to home goods, and so that K-shaped is really interesting that you're seeing. Is there a pickup in the industrial? You mentioned that those that tend to then service the goods that would wind up in the home would lend to e-commerce, et cetera, but home-based goods have done far better. Are you seeing the industrial start to pick up?
Yes, we are, and that's how we got back to the 100% level, because the folks that were, say, just think about toilet paper, for example. If you made kind of the grade of toilet paper that's used in the home, you're probably doing better than somebody who makes the grade of toilet paper that's often deployed in a office building. So what we saw was that during the trough, the guys that were doing the home kind of markets didn't fall nearly as far as the industrial ones. And then it's really the industrial serve coming back that's got us, back up to over 100% year over year shipment volumes.
So with this tale of two economies that we have going in industrial and that pickup that you're seeing right now, or what are some of the industries that are seeing the biggest pickup? I'm sure that oil and gas has been a drag on that industrial pickup. Is it still a drag right now?
Yeah, it is. Certainly, both the oil and gas and the industries that serve that, like the frac sand markets and things like that, are still challenged. And you see that in some of the layoff announcements that have come out of that industry, which is, some of what we're seeing as trends that customers in our industries are looking for is how do they do more with less? Because generally speaking, they're shedding people faster than the volume drops. And so they're seeking more automation. Initially, early on, it was more tactical type requests. Now it's like, hey, how do you transform my business process so I can long-term sustain with a greater degree of automation, or to leverage our services side where we can convert, kind of a fixed cost of direct labor into a variable cost of a service. Some other things that we're seeing kind of across the board is the desire for kind of touchless pickup and delivery. So think of not just the driver not getting out of the truck to sign paper, but also validating quantities picked up or delivered and things like that. So we're seeing an increase in demand for the mobile app and kiosk type deployments that we do to get rid of the paperwork and get rid of the people having to kind of get next to each other for that process, as well as how do they do some of what we were talking about earlier with the tender rejections. We see that, quite a bit in the market that we serve. And so we've seen a typical pickup in spot bid automation loads where we can help our customers cover those instantaneously without manual labor. Because you guys know, in a market like we're seeing now, the half-life of a truck with a good price is about 60 seconds. And so if you don't grab it right away, you're going to lose that capacity.
No doubt about it. And I was going to go there a little bit because IntelliTrans, not only are you guys tracking these shipments and providing that transparency and planning and so on from ground to production with these raw materials, but you have an operations center as well that enhances and traces and actually works with the carriers of choice of your clients to improve and guarantee certain on-time percentages and cycle times within their logistics supply chain. Are you seeing pressures there? How is the supply chain holding up on the upstream?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I'm fortunate enough that, unlike some of the customers of mine that we were just talking about, I can't hire fast enough. And so that's one of the things that's really kind of benefiting us. And one of the trends we're seeing, both of our customers, the high-tech industry, and ourselves transitioning to a talent anywhere model, where instead of my folks having to be in my ops center in Conway, Arkansas, they could be in the middle of Illinois or Nevada or whatever, because we've really proven, as many companies have, that ability to collaborate remotely and work from anywhere.
It's going to be change. I mean, there's a lot of change in 2020. Do you see this running into 2021? Do you see a chaotic market for most of 21, Ken?
Yeah, from what I'm telling my team members is, any kind of resumption in office activities is probably not till July. You guys were talking earlier about the distribution and logistics of the vaccines, and it's just going to take some time to get it out to everybody involved. But I also think we've reached a kind of a new normal where even absent the pandemic and waiting for a vaccine, I probably would do more remote work even now than I would have done without that forcing function.
Excellent stuff, Ken. How do people reach out to you or IntelliTrans and find out more?
Sure, they can certainly come to the IntelliTrans.com website or follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter with the IntelliTrans handle for both platforms.
Excellent stuff, Ken. We'll check in with you again soon to get another update. Appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a wonderful day and stay safe out there.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, it's interesting to see what's going on upstream.
It is. It's very interesting to see what's going on upstream because it's going to filter down in 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, we talk quite a bit and about upstream in the sense of imports coming into the U.S. and how hard it is to get that ocean capacity and even in air freight, obviously, air cargo capacity. But you don't think about the other side of that factory, trying to get those raw materials in order to produce that and hit those demands. So it's really good to check in with Ken and find out what's going on there.
It really is. It really is. So let's check in on the weather again and talk about some dangerous conditions for truckers.
Yeah, we have, well, it's not a hurricane anymore, but it's a tropical storm now. But we're talking about parts of Central America now. And the reason I want to mention it, even though it's not U.S., because this was a Category 4 storm when it hit Nicaragua about 12 or 13 hours ago. And it had winds of 155 miles per hour. And it's hitting areas that got hit by another major hurricane just a couple of weeks ago. So we're talking about parts of Central America that are going to see just severe and long-term damage as far as infrastructure, supply chains down in the local and regional areas down there. So here it is on Sonar Critical Events. The name of this one is Iota. This is the 30th named storm of the season. It has been a crazy year as far as the Atlantic season. That's the most number of named storms ever on record for a single Atlantic season. So not a record we want to break, but those are just the facts. And this one is also, for this late in the season, the strongest Atlantic named storm ever. So it's going to keep moving across Nicaragua, Honduras. It's also going to affect parts of Belize and also Guatemala. The main threat now is not winds. It's no longer the winds. It's very, very heavy rain for the next couple of days, anywhere from 10 to maybe 20 or 30 inches even in some areas. So there's going to be a lot of flooding, mudslides, roads and bridges probably getting washed out. And again, a lot of the areas in the impact zone here already have had problems with this from the storm a couple of weeks ago. There's going to be power lines, communication lines down everywhere. And conceivably, it could take years for these areas to really rebuild and get back anywhere close to normal, unfortunately.
So Nick, you're talking about weather impacts right there. You have an article out on FreightWaves.com about weather impacts. Can you give us a quick synopsis on that?
Yeah, it's mostly information really for shippers and how basically the 5 ways that weather affects freight shipments. Has a few tips in there on what shippers can do to kind of try and stay ahead of Mother Nature. The main impacts, the most obvious one is on road conditions, which causes delays, but it can also cause terminals to shut down. It can also take drivers kind of out of the loop as far as capacity if they're delayed for long periods of time as well because of severe weather. So there's all kinds of good information in there, and that is up on our website, FreightWaves.com.
Thank you very much today, Nick. And yeah, go to FreightWaves.com to catch those tips that Nick always publishes for truckers. And you know what? You can catch new shows like this every day, live at noon, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern time, on FreightWaves TV, FreightWaves LinkedIn, Facebook, or on demand at Freightcast on wherever you download podcasts, and those channels as well, Apple TV as well, Fire Stick.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And you guys did What the Truck yesterday.
We did.
How was it?
It was great. I talked about a little bit of it. We talked about the vaccine race and the implications to logistics challenge, between the Pfizer and Moderna. We talked about that. We talked, one of the interesting things, or not interesting, but important things, I should say, is the Truckers Last Mile charity that we talked to them and what they do. It's truckerslastmile.org, I believe, is what you go to there. But they help out getting deceased drivers back home, right? Because you think about these drivers could be thousands of miles away and death from sickness, illness, or crash getting them back. But they also they have also charities to help out those children during and families during Christmas time. So if you get a chance, go to those areas and really go there and give them a helping hand, because like many other charities, like the St. Christopher's Fund, the live truck show events that have been canceled all this past year and going into 2020 canceled, those are their major fundraising events, and they don't exist.
So it's very important.
So it's very important. These families in logistics and our families, actually, all of us, need this help.
Yeah, and I just said Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. But tomorrow we have a special time for Put That Coffee Down, the freight sales podcast for closers in the freight world. And that's with Dooner and myself. That's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. And we're going to have a great discussion about sales and warehouse management, how you can push that through and create more sales as a freight agent with Open Docs.
Good stuff.
So until that time, 4 p.m. tomorrow, peace and love.
Peace and love, everyone.